What are we talking about today? Well, we're focused on really what's been going on recently. So let's kind of look a little bit back on 2020, what's happened, what are the main themes running through this, and then what's coming through in 2021. What are we seeing in terms of products in the market? I'm going to focus a bit on some of the European markets. We'll talk very much about things like Delta 8 as a phenomenon in the US, very important. I'll have a few slides on a consumer survey we did earlier this year on consumer habits in the CBD space. I will touch on regulation on novel food. There are other speakers I know that have focused on novel food, so I won't go into too much detail, but I'll mention it in the context of how we think it's going to affect the market going forwards, and then just finish up with a few words on what the growth of the sector is likely to be over the next few years. So what has been happening, and I'm sure a lot of you already know this, but let's just kind of review what happened in 2020. One of the biggest things, of course, is COVID and the impact that had, particularly on retail. For every sector, of course, massively impacted, but I think particularly for CBD and particularly for CBD dedicated stores, retail offline stores, which were not deemed to be essential services, clearly. So a lot of those shut during lockdown, and we did see a shift to online retail. Online retail was already really important in CBD space in many countries, and it's in a way been boosted by a lot of the lockdown. We've seen offline retail come back, and I think offline retail is going to continue to become more and more important as CBD moves into the mainstream. But I think that it's definitely had a shift because of COVID-19. Continued innovation by that, I think we're still seeing many new brands and new products come into the market. So that's very much the sign of a vibrant sector, that there are plenty of new types of products coming in, and we'll talk a little bit about the types of new formats as well. But just on the face of it, there are definitely lots of new products coming through. Regulatory, and I suppose a lot of our work is tracking this regulatory change, and as I said, it's really, really crucial for this sector. It's a controversial sector. It's very connected to cannabis and all the issues that go around cannabis regulation, so incredibly important. But some of the big things that happened and are continuing to happen, novel food is the most obvious one. I think that was the big story really of last year, and of course the deadline for applications for novel food approval in the UK has just passed at the end of March. We're yet to see really where that's going. We've had a number of products that have been validated. That's kind of stage one of the process, but it doesn't mean that those products are going to end up being approved at the end. But we've definitely also seen that the UK are leaders in this regulatory process, and I think that's really interesting. There's been a lot of criticism, I guess, of regulation of this new sector, and I think there's a lot of uncertainty from the companies in the sector. But I think we've seen a number of sectors different to CBD that have moved from a kind of unregulated to a regulated sector, and I don't think that this is unusual, and I think that the process that's being gone through by the FSA is going to work. So I'm pretty optimistic about it. I also think that what's happened in the UK is going to have a big impact on the speed with which the European Union and the European Commission in particular starts to approve novel food products in mainland Europe. So I think it's a very positive sign. One of the other things to mention around regulations that we've seen in other sectors is that it generally has a really positive impact on growth in the sector. And what's really needed, as we know in CBD at the moment, is to regain some consumer confidence in the category, to get some trust back into the category. And I think this regulatory environment will provide that. So we're pretty optimistic about the impacts of regulation, particularly around novel food. We've got lots of other areas of regulation that are perhaps a little less important, just because particularly vape and cosmetics are have different regulatory environments completely. Vape is going through a change. I suspect that it will be included. CBD as a vape inhaled product will probably be included in the new negotiation of the Tobacco Products Directive. It will be certainly going to include loose hemp flower that is sold in a number of European markets and is actually taxed in a number of markets as well. So that's something that we've seen as a change which came through in 2020. But so both vape and kind of loose flower is likely to be included within some new regulatory environments relatively soon on the European level. Cosmetics, well, we had the Canavate case, really important case. We still haven't seen the full impact of that ruling yet at the European Court. I think what's very interesting, though, is it's immediately changed the regulatory landscape for cosmetics, and we've seen a real boost in topicals and cosmetics, probably as a result of that. The regulatory environment now for cosmetics using plant-derived CBD is clear. And we're seeing, as a result, a number of bigger brands look at CBD as an ingredient in topical products. So I think that's very positive. And as you can see there, in that next bullet point, we're talking about growth in topicals. That's certainly an area that we saw start in 2020 and continuing into this year. In terms of other products, as I said, flower has become a big thing in some markets, and it will continue to grow, I think. I suspect that it will also get more consistent regulation around Europe. So we'll start to see that come through. It won't be in the UK, but it certainly will be in other European markets. For North American markets, clearly very different setup, and the way that dispensaries are dealing with low THC hemp flower is very different. I think the other thing that I mentioned at the start, so Delta 8 is really an important element of the CBD market in the US. My personal view is I don't think it'll be allowed to continue as it is right now. It's being sold all over the place, particularly in retail in states without cannabis regulation. And I think that situation both is potentially really damaging for CBD, but also I very much doubt that it'll be allowed to continue for very much longer. It's almost certain that it'll be included within regulations, both at a state and potentially at a federal level, that are applied to all THC. So I think it's a slight anomaly. It shows the kind of ability of this sector to evolve and create new ideas. I think in the case of Delta 8, I think there are certainly some concerns. It's potentially a sort of a PR disaster for CBD waiting to happen. I hope it won't turn into that, but we'll see. Just finally on this slide, so we've had continued pricing pressure. So prices have come down. I've got some slides to show that. And as many of you will know, the wholesale price particularly for CBD isolate has continued to decline. We're seeing prices now down as low as kind of $200 a kilo. I think it's a reflection of the glut of hemp in many, particularly US regions. So we've got oversupply, and as a result, the prices are coming back down. So I think we're probably at rock bottom on the wholesale market. On the consumer side, I think prices are still coming down, but I suspect, given the new regulatory environment that we're starting to see, we're going to start to see more consolidation, and prices will probably stabilize a bit. Last bullet point, product diversification. So I've talked about some of these things. We've certainly talked about other cannabinoids, particularly Delta 8. Not a huge amount of interest in some of the other minor cannabinoids in the European markets, but I know that's something that's starting to creep through in the US. Active ingredients, so kind of functional ingredients added to CBD very much is a phenomenon that happened in 2020 and is continuing. So we're seeing more and more products come through with added ingredients like melatonin, turmeric, and so on. And then I think the final points are more that the CBD market is becoming more specialized, and we're seeing more particular products that are designed for particular segments of consumers. quite rightly, CBD, we need to understand, is an ingredient which will be put into a number of different formats, and it's inevitably going to kind of subdivide into the various different segments that it's aimed at. Okay, a few charts just to kind of, I suppose, show what I was talking about in the first slide, and just to kind of confirm some of this. So one of the first points, and quite positive, I suppose, is that we're continuing to see new products come into the market. So here is just looking at last year, actually, the products that came into the market in the UK compared to the ones that were taken off the market. And we're seeing obviously a net positive, particularly in oils, but in topicals and vape as well. We're seeing more products and more new products added to the market than are taken off the market. So that's a very kind of positive sign, I suppose. Similar story in Germany, same thing really. Oils and topicals very positive in terms of net positive adds to the range of products that are available to consumers. Pricing pressure, again, this is looking back a bit further. So this is looking back towards the second half of 2019, and then up to the end of last year, the second half of last year. And we're seeing price declines in all categories. And in fact, we're seeing some of these price declines accelerate, so particularly edibles, for example. The one exception to that is that flower prices have been going up in some cases. These are averages, by the way, across a number of countries. If you look at the bottom there, the countries we've used pricing from is UK, Germany, Greece, Switzerland, US. So it's trying to give a kind of general picture. And of course, if you look at any one of those countries individually, the same pattern comes through. But particularly, flower is very much a phenomenon that doesn't, for example, exist in the UK. So there's very little data in the UK, but it's something that is coming through quite strong in Switzerland and Greece, for example. So pricing is continuing to go down. As I said, I think that the price decline is going to slow as we start to move into a regulated environment where products are, well, I suspect that the competition will be higher, and there will be some consolidation given the number of products that are likely to get through novel food approval.